the more cotton the planters wanted to grow, and that took more slaves. Slaves in the Upper South became incredibly more valuable as commodities because of this demand for them in the Deep South. They were sold off in droves, and that created a second Middle Passage. And in many ways, the second Middle Passage was just as devastating as the first. To feed King Cotton, more than 1 million African Americans were carried off into the Deep South. That's 2.5 times the number that were brought to the United States from Africa. It was the largest forced migration in American history.
We can pause on that note, and I wanted to go, I'll let it play out, go a little bit. There's a video right after this. But what you should really be reminded of is that the power of cotton to the slave trade wasn't a small thing. It wasn't like some simple little something where, you know, it was just part of the slave trade. It was the small part. It wasn't so big. No, the primary function of causing most people to be displaced in the United States to the South, to be brought from Africa, was cotton. Prior to that, it was sugar. Sugar was huge. The sugar plantations and the sugar cane plantations down in Jamaica, down in Haiti, other places, that was huge. That was huge. There was also other plantations. Basically, and I say this all the time, our slavery, our problems today, as they are connected to the history of racial injustice and slavery, were economic issues driven by an economic system, a mercantile system, that developed chattel slavery. And chattel slavery, to be clear, it means a slavery where the slave has absolutely no rights whatsoever, was promoted on an international level. And the core of it was the displacement of certain crops into places where they believed they could take more land, they being Western Europeans. And listen to me when I say it. I'm going to be specific about saying Western Europeans. And you need to understand, I have a beef with white people, pink people at large. We got a beef with Western Europeans and what they did and what they do and the attitude they got because of it and the stuff they still doing. And every time you pay your money into it, not this product, but every time you pay your money into it, you're paying into that nonsense. So we got a beef with that, but we don't have a beef with pink people. Like, you know, just everybody who has that shade, we got a beef with you. That's not true. One of the main reasons it's not true, just a little caveat of a side note, is because slavery didn't start with us. Modern slavery, in the way that it actually started with the Slavs. And these were Western Europeans, Romans, that were enslaving the Slavs. And from that word Slav is where we have slave. So the concept of chattel slavery came from people that looked like this. These were the first slaves. And listen, don't get all caught up in this. Don't let your anger for Western Europeans, for Anglo-Saxons, French, Portuguese, understand exactly who it is that we got beef with. We don't have a history of Slavs enslaving black people. We do have a history of Western Europeans enslaving Slavs and enslaving Africans that are now black or African Americans. And when we look at a map of what that Slavic land looked like, what those slaves, original slaves looked like, You know that little green spot right there? That's where I'm sitting right now. I'm in Kazakhstan. You ever ask me what's the connection? You're like, what's the connection between, why we in Asia, brother? What about Africa? Yes, we got a connection to it all. And we as people who have grown in the United States have a responsibility to rectify from our source of success the system, especially the system of slavery, to destroy it at every particular possible angle possible. So remember, that's a little caveat. But I just want to kind of say, if you're talking about Slavic and slaves, it don't start with us. It started with them. And we don't own nothing but for that. But they are our brothers in kind. They are our brothers in kind. They are our brothers in kind because their history has been very similar to ours. That is the original, sklavos. It's a Roman word. That's where the word Slavic came from together. Sklavos root was Slav, and the Slavic root, slave. And this is why they called you a slave when they showed up. The word slave was no African word. It didn't come out of the African space. Now, I want us to go a little bit. Like I said, you can always look back at these things. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper here. There's a wonderful video here that talks about the rise of cotton and the impact they had on African Americans. And remember, we're back at the core now. I could have a conversation about supply chain dynamics with you. We can talk about these shirts right here. We are talking about these shirts. This is all part of it. For you to ignore it is to ignore everything of value. And like I told you, if you're a person who does not care where your money comes from, who you hurt, or what you do, you just like the people who enslaved your people, they didn't care. They were sitting in Europe somewhere like, I can't worry about that little Negro baby down there getting his ass whipped. I can't worry about that little Negro girls getting fondled by some little white guy from Britain and raped over. I can't worry about that. I got to make my money. That was the attitude that was persistent in Europe that allowed for the bad things to happen. It was out of sight, out of mind. They just as far from the United States as you are from anywhere else that things are going on now. And those people with that attitude still own the cotton manufacturers, and more importantly, the cotton gins, and run the National Cotton Institute that maintains cotton in the United States. Those are the same slave-owning families. And every time you buy one of their shirts, every time you sell one, you are an agent of their prosperity. And all you do is feed into the system. Let's see how much. Let's learn a little bit more about this.
My name is Clint Smith.
And this is Crash Course Black American History. So if you look at the tag on the shirt that you're wearing, you'll probably find that at least a portion of it is made of cotton. I mean, cotton is everywhere. It's in our shirts, in our pants, in curtains and blankets, and so many other things that we don't even realize. But even though that cotton on your back was meant to keep you comfortable, the historical reality of the United States is that the cotton industry was built on the backs of black folks. A lot of cotton is grown in the hot and humid climate of the southern United States. And a lot of this country's wealth was built on the cotton trade. But it's easy to forget that part of the reason that cotton was so lucrative in early America was because it was harvested with the labor of enslaved people. And even though the dirty work of the cotton industry took place mainly in the southern states, many white people in the northern United States gained their fortunes through the exploitation of enslaved workers in the South. And the reason that cotton became such a central economic pillar was not just because of what was happening in the US, but because of an entire global financial network that, whether they sanctioned the use of slavery themselves or not, incentivized the use of enslaved labor to satisfy the enormous international demand for cotton. It's time we learn about how cotton became king. Let's start the show. By the time of the Civil War, the United States was wealthy. I'm talking Scrooge McDuck swimming in golden coins rich. It had become one of the major slave trading capitals of the world and a major exporter of cotton. According to scholar Henry Louis Gates, cotton was the first mass consumer commodity, which is just a fancy way of saying that everybody in the world wanted it. They wanted it for their clothes, for their blankets, for their rugs, for their socks. I mean, demand across the globe was exploding. The cotton industry was so powerful that it not only grew the US economy, but many economies in Europe as well. But most nations couldn't compete with the United States production level. According to historian Edward Baptist, the North American interior had thousands of acres of possible cotton fields, thousands for each one in the Caribbean. And in order to develop all of this land, there was a greater need for laborers to work the cotton plantations of the South and mid-Atlantic United States. And as had become standard practice in the US in the 18th and 19th centuries, the plan was for most of these laborers to be enslaved black people. Enslaved labor and cotton went hand in hand to produce profit. And the work, it was more than just backbreaking. It was torture. Charles Ball, a black man and author who escaped slavery, wrote that the brutality of the cotton industry was enough to make an individual contemplate taking their own life. He said in his 1837 autobiography, Slavery in the United States, quote, "Surely if anything can justify a man in taking his life into his own hands and terminating his existence, no one can attach blame to the slaves on many of the cotton plantations of the South when they cut short their breath and the agonies of the present being by a single stroke. What is life worth amidst hunger, nakedness, and excessive toil under the continually uplifted lash?" It really doesn't get more clear than that. And in 1793, the cotton gin arrived, and it transformed the cotton industry, the global economy, and in horrific ways, the lives of enslaved people. The cotton gin significantly ramped up cotton production in the United States, especially in South Carolina and Georgia. Let's check that out in the thought bubble. Before 1793, separating the sticky seeds from cotton was a laborious task. Then, the mechanical cotton gin, invented by Eli Whitney, made the process much faster and easier than it had ever been. What would happen is that cotton would be threaded through a wooden drum filled with hooks that caught hold of the fibers and pulled them through a mesh. The holes in that mesh were too small to allow the seeds through, but the cotton fibers themselves were easily pulled through. While some larger gins would later be powered by horses and even steam engines, Whitney used a smaller version. Whitney's hand-cranked machine could remove the seeds from 50 pounds of cotton in a single day. What this meant was that planters needed a way to grow and pick more cotton to keep up with the new accelerated pace of processing. And at the same time, market conditions in Europe meant cotton was more desirable than ever. What this meant was that planters needed even more labor from even more enslaved workers than they did before. Demand for other industrial cotton machinery grew as well, like new machines for spinning cotton or steamboats to transport massive bales of it. This drastically changed the American economic landscape. By the 1850s, cotton provided 3/5 of American exports, and the yield of raw cotton doubled every decade after 1800. By some estimates, the United States supplied 3/4 of the global supply of cotton by the start of the Civil War. If cotton wasn't king before, it certainly was now. Thanks, Thought Bubble. The economic impact of the cotton industry on the United States and the enslaved people whose labor sustained it is very clear. Again, historian Edward Baptist writes, all told, more than $600 million, or almost half of the economic activity in the United States in 1836, derived directly or indirectly from cotton produced by the million-odd slaves, 6% of the total U.S. population, who in that year toiled in labor camps on slavery's frontier. And again, it wasn't just the United States, it was the world. Most of the Western world's economies benefited from the cotton industry. Historian Gene Daddle argues that cotton produced by enslaved people was the driving force for territorial expansion in the Old Southwest and fostered trade between Europe and the United States. Major northern cities, like New York City, needed raw cotton for their own industries. New England was also seriously dependent on raw cotton for the textile revolution. New England mills consumed 283.7 million pounds of cotton, or 67% of the cotton used by U.S. mills in 1860. So any notion that the North wasn't intimately involved in slavery is something that we should immediately toss out the window. Abroad, countries like Britain and France also depended on raw cotton. According to Jean Daddle, Britain, the most powerful nation in the world, relied on slave-produced cotton for over 80% of its essential industrial raw material. English textile mills accounted for 40% of Britain's exports. 1/5 of Britain's 22 million people were directly or indirectly involved with cotton textiles. And it didn't stop there. One of the main causes of the Civil War was cotton and the status of the enslaved laborers who produced that cotton. Southern slaveholders were so financially attached to the cotton industry that they were willing to go to war over it. And at the end of the war, cotton was one of the bargaining tools that the South used to assure that they would still have a place and political power in the Union. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll get to the Civil War soon. Now, let's do some deeper thinking about the economic implications of slavery. In 1860, in large part tied to the explosion of the cotton industry, the 4 million enslaved people in the United States were worth more than all of the railroads and factories in the nation combined. Those enslaved workers were worth more than all of the manufacturing in the United States. So Black people's labor has played an enormous role in America's ascent as a global economic superpower. But enslaved people themselves didn't get to reap the benefits of the economic explosion they created. The vast majority of Black folks were not allowed to own any property. And if they did, it could be seized from them at any moment without them being able to do much of anything about it. Even when slavery was abolished, the sharecropping system in the South worked in similar ways, plunging Black Americans and their families into devastating debt while they owned nothing of their own. The implications of this are profound. Let's step back and consider that intergenerational chattel slavery in the United States, in which Black people rarely owned their own land, lasted for 250 years before ending, technically at least, in 1865. Let's then consider that sharecropping, in which enormous numbers of Black people continued to not own their own land, lasted well into the 1950s and arguably later. This directly impacts generational wealth in the United States today. If your family was able to accrue income, equity, and mobility by owning land that produced cotton, or any other crop for that matter, and then pass it down across generations, it would quite naturally leave your descendants in a more economically secure position than those who came before them. But Black folks, despite working the land, cultivating the land, and picking the cotton and crops that grew on the land, for the most part, didn't have any opportunity to reap the financial benefits of that land. What this did was leave many Black families, well after slavery ended and into the 20th century, with little, if anything, to pass down to their children, something that shapes the sort of opportunities that their descendants would or would not have. And this gap between white and Black people is compounded decade after decade after decade until it's no longer a gap in wealth, it's a gulf. Cotton was the United States' biggest export for more than a century. That's more than 100 years of wealth creation and industry that Black Americans not only carried on their backs, but were designated to never profit from. I mean, calling it a head start for white people doesn't even accurately capture it. It wasn't just a head start. It was like you were running while the person you're racing against had chains on their feet and death threats in their ears. So when we talk about creating a more equitable nation, part of what we have to think about is how to account for and make amends for what was done to people and what was kept from people for generations. The question remains, how can we compensate those who this country purposefully left behind? Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. With the help of all these nice people and our animation team is Thoughtcast.
It's a wonderful outlook on the impact of cotton to your current day reality. So basically, if you just take a second and think about it, cotton and promoting the system of using cotton, and now I have to say the system of oil as well, it feeds the same wealth gap that you're trying to get rid of. I went blurry real quick, right? The same wealth gap, the same generational wealth that you're trying to create by building your t-shirt business, you are actually promoting if you don't buy your t-shirt from the right place. You're increasing the wealth gap. You're making sure that you'll never, ever, ever get to the point where you can overcome the system that was created by the system of cotton, now promoted through the system of oil. Because I say oil, remember I'm talking about polyester. Polyester is a product of petroleum, but mostly cotton t-shirts. And our inability to understand or want to get involved in the world of cotton causes us to be some of the greatest perpetuators of our own demise. But it's bigger than that. It's so much bigger, because I know a couple of you right now are saying, oh, well, I don't buy my t-shirts from the United States. I don't use American-made cotton. I'm not paying those people, let's say it like we say it, I'm not paying them white folks who did that bad stuff to us. I'm not paying them to keep on extending that wealth gap. I'm not going to give heed to a whole nother generation. Also, I want you to kind of look into something. I want you to think about cotton in this thing. Just really quick note. Cotton gin. We hear how the speeding up of the cotton gin caused the speeding up of slavery. So basically slavery grew because the cotton gin needed more slave labor, more labor. Let's look at this really quick. This is the last historical thing I'm going to hit. And then we're going to talk about something. Now, this is 1660. I want you to look at the growth of slavery. This maps slavery in this trade. Each time you see a little dot go across, and we're going to switch this over. Each time you see a little dot go across, that's a slave ship that was moving across. Now, I want you to understand what happens when we start having cotton come in. And then in the late 1700s, where the cotton gin becomes extremely popular. So going in the 1600s, this is what it looks like. Now, what is that? That's silver down in South America. That's sugar, sugar cane, so forth and so on. One thing you might notice here is how much of the slaves are going to South America and not North America, right? Then there's the speed up. Things start kicking up big time, going into the 1700s. So now we've got cotton playing a role. It starts to become important. And then as we start, the more important the cotton becomes, the more slave trade increases. There's a reason why we associate cotton to slavery. And let's take a pause real quick, right around there. So now we introduce major cotton production. The world is taking it in, and slaves are being brought by droves. I just want you to have this visual in your head. I want you to think about it, to see it when you think about these products and whether or not you care. Look at the pace when the cotton gin came into play, 1766. And look at that pace. Look at what it does. Look at it. I'm going to slow it down. Let's back up out of it. That's enough of the historical piece. Cotton has always been connected. I'm sitting here wearing this shirt now. It's cotton. I have on pants. They have cotton in them. You most likely have cotton on. You put it on every single morning almost. Maybe you got some silk pieces. Maybe you've got some synthetic pieces. There's even bamboo fabric now. But 9 times out of 10, the majority of things in your closet are made of cotton. And the businesses that you run are made of cotton. So it's about time that we have a conversation. We're going to wrap this one up soon about cotton and where it comes from. Now, that's the historical element tied to our own oppression. It's important that we also look to the now to understand not just how cotton had so much to do with slavery. Now, we would like to believe in a beautiful world that what happened to the cotton industry after slavery was gone is this beautiful picture that's painted here. You know, the fact that there's a big old machine going out doing everything, and everything is perfectly and beautifully automated, and that's why we don't need slaves. Well, there's a problem. I want you to take a look at that machine, and I want you to see what it just did. It had to scrape the ground. Now, that might not seem much to you, but let me explain to you what it does to the manufacturing process. It puts dirt in the cotton. It puts little specks of dirt in the cotton. Now, when you run that through a gin, you have to clean it more. You have to do several more things to try to get a higher quality. The quality of cotton is reduced significantly because of the dirt in the cotton. Now, we only just talk about the land and the fact that the minerals are being depleted year over year, that the crop can't grow as nice, that American cotton actually suffers from a lot of these issues. We won't even talk about the fact that the labor is intensive and expensive. Even though you can run a huge farm like this with just 3-4 guys, the reality is the cost of the machines, the gasoline. We saw gas prices, right? Gas prices went up to almost $8 a gallon in the United States. What in the world do you think that did to the combines that have to get your food? You wonder why food prices went up? You think cotton prices didn't go up? The same agricultural products. Cotton prices went up. That's why you can't buy these in the United States. That's why all of us who are trying to make money out of this, we can't do this in the U.S. Because of all those factors that are thrown inside there that make that price go up. You got to talk supply chain if you want to be a business owner. You cannot just simply buy stuff constantly looking for the cheapest place to buy it with no concern and no care about what's happening. Reiterate, we buy these shirts, $3.50, $4, and sell them for $10, $15, upwards to $25. The margins are there to be responsible. That dirt in the process is very hard to get out, and it makes a lower quality product. So guess what happens to that cotton trade? Guess where most of our cotton comes from that is in our products that we use from day to day? It's sourced from all around the world in very low-cost markets. If we go online and we look, so what we do is we go this. I'm looking for the right link here. I want to show you the top cotton-producing countries in the world. And I want you to understand that at a point, cotton no longer just comes from people who have big machines. Some of the most inexpensive cotton that we have to buy comes from places where they can pick it by hand. Okay? So this is the #1 cotton producing country in the world. India. Why India? Because India has just short of 1.6 billion people. The country's population is almost 5 times greater than the United States of America. The availability of labor is immense. And if you have never been there, then I invite you to come with me so I can show you what it's like to live as a poor Indian family. Especially, let me get a little closer, especially a dark-skinned Indian family. Black Indians. How many black Indians have you met in the United States? How many dark-skinned Indians have you actually seen working at your tech jobs? How many dark-skinned Indians do you know? Not a lot. Mostly, the caste system inside of India discriminates against black Indians worse than we're discriminated as black Americans. You got to hear what I just said. The #1 cotton producing place in the world. The majority of the cotton picked by hand, by entire families, by children even. You just go online, look it up yourself. And if you're bold enough, come over here with me and I'll take you to India. It's a 4-hour flight. And I'll show you with your own eyes. Your heart will race and you'll want to run out to the field. Picked by hand. The exact same way. The exact same way. The exact same way that your forefathers had to pick it. For the same reasons. Except for now, grace to your t-shirt business. You're a part of the problem. The problem ain't on you. When you buy from the wrong places, when you don't question where that cotton come from, and by the way, most people will lie to you, then you are perpetuating a system of slavery. Today, you have become the new careless European in the slavery of other people. If you're watching this, make a comment. Open up. I'm not going to do this for too much longer. I was moved by this. Deeply moved. Because I was sitting here at my table and I came across, not the product. Brothers and sisters had asked me to go find the product. To find a way to inexpensively get shirts to them that were made abroad in Asia. People were telling me about the problems with shipping from China and so forth and so on. So, as we do, we went out and found it. I needed to add an additional 20 cents to each shirt. That makes it a little more expensive than the ones that you order from California through the Chinese distribution system. And I was saying, man, I need to understand about the quality. And this was my mind was, why is the quality of Uzbeki cotton, why is the quality of the things that I'm offering better than some of the things that our brothers and sisters are buying now? What's the differentiator? And so I started to research. And I gotta be honest with you, the more I research about this product, the more you end up in a place where your heart starts to get affected. I said earlier, if you're the kind of person your heart don't get affected by where your money go, then I ain't talking to you. But I'm damn sure talking to those of us who actually have a moment when we see little black babies on the back of black women out there picking cotton. And to think that we might propagate that when they're treated bad. Now, I'm not talking about ones that get paid a good salary. Hell, agriculture is agriculture. Picking the cotton wasn't never the problem. It's how you treat it to pick it. It's how they save money. That 10 cents that you save, that $1, that 30 cents, for every piece you take off of the price you most likely are doing it at the cost of the enslavement and the hardship of these people. And you need to think about that. And you need to react off of it and change it. Now, number two, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Who is the second producer of cotton in the world? The United States. That's because your great-great-great-grandparents cleared so much land it made it possible for them to do so. Who you think owned that? We already went through that. I'm not going through that again. China, with its 1.3 million people, third largest producer of cotton on the planet Earth. Now, they're showing people by hand. A lot of it's picked by machine. A lot of it's picked by hand too. Brazil, Pakistan. And you didn't see number 6 or 7, Turkey, Uzbekistan, Australia, Turkmenistan, Burkina Faso. And you get into understanding Burkina Faso. You get an understanding of Burkina Faso. And you start understanding that 50% of all black Americans have in them, even 60%, blood from Benin, Burkina Faso, or Nigeria, because of how many of us were traded as slaves, and the idea that it might still be going on today. I would like to show you how all of this is tied together. There's a wonderful video. You can come back and watch the whole thing. It's too long for us to watch together, but we can just start in on it a little bit. Now, this thing talks about the modern slave trade. It's not about a slave trade. It's more about forced labor around the system of cotton. And yes, it includes all of the countries that were just listed. Not one, not two, all. If you back up a little bit here, I want to show you this. These are the bales of cotton. Let's turn on this. Let's switch over.
To see the production
So
line
these are the
was a
bales of
completely
cotton and the
mechanized
production
and
I showed you
functioning
before.
24 hours a day.
This is in
To
India.
operate these machines, the teams work through
Most
day,
of the people
that is, day and
working in a
night.
lot of these places are young women.
Here too are the faces of teenagers. Officially,
Under
night shifts
age
are off limits for under
14,
18s.
13,
The manager assures
12
us, of course, that his
years
factory
old.
is above board and
That's
that he
in the
respects
factory.
the legislation.
That's where it's clean. In order to reduce the cost of that shirt you sell, to get it down to the
Finally,
price
he
that you
takes
can
us
get it
see
to,
his warehouses, where the cotton he imports
and
from
inside
abroad
of
is
this
stored.
warehouse in India, yeah, I'll let you hear it yourself.
And you have Uzbek as well?
Yes, Turkmen, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan. So 3 things are there, but you are saying, you are trying to say Uzbek. This is Uzbek zone.
This is Uzbek as well.
It's whilst in this factory that we learn that Uzbek cotton lacks something the rest of the cotton has.
Normally they don't have any sticker for Uzbek like this.
They don't have stickers?
No.
No?
But US cotton they have. Any countries they are writing there. This is Burkina Faso, this is Mali, like this. And even Australia, US, we are getting cotton with mark. But for Uzbek zone, no mark.
So I want you to hear what my man just said.
No indication of the
Not only is he
country of
talking about the
origin,
fact that
traceability
some of the cotton
is
doesn't
limited.
have a label on it, but listen to the Indian manufacturer tell you all the places they buy cotton from. The United States, Burkina Faso, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. They get it from all over. And these are one of the largest producers of cotton shirts and cotton clothing in the world. This is where H&M, this is where all the other brands get their stuff from. I'm gonna roll back just a little bit so you can see it, right? I've been to the places like this. I've sat in these places. I've talked with these people. I've lived with them. I've eaten food at their house. So I want you to see here, let's go back here. All right. And you can see that these factories and where they sell, these are multi-billion-dollar industries. Multi-billion-dollar companies, excuse me. And if you can see it, they claim that all the cotton comes responsibly from Australia and the United States. That means that they bring in that little bit of U.S. cotton so you can say made with U.S. cotton. But how many factories have you seen in the United States where there's 50, 60, 70, 100, 200 women sitting there sewing t-shirts all day long? I don't know of any. There might be a couple still, but they're far and in between. And most of those little towns have failed completely. So even though you see that American cotton space, most of it's for export. And you said, brother, it is disgraceful. And yes, this exists today. And what I'm talking about is our role in it. I want to roll this back a little bit because one of the things I want you to see is this. I want you to understand where I am. Now I'm in Kazakhstan. Just below me is Uzbekistan. The shirts here are made of Uzbek cotton. They are. But there's a story to these that are totally different than everything I've told you. I'm going to say that last, and that's how I'm going to end this conversation. Let's take a look at this real quick.
Have you heard of Executive Order 14067? Most people probably haven't, but it could completely...
Pamphlets in hand, she reminds the civil servants of their rights.
Вы тоже медик? Медик? Вы такой получали листочек?
First of all, what you got to understand is kind of funny. She's saying, "Тоже нет." She's saying, I hear her speaking in Russian. Because the language she's speaking is a language we've been sitting here mastering as we sit in this space. So I started to come tell you about the power of the Freedom Nation launching its Kazakh initiatives, being here on the border, and one of the reasons why I'm asking you to come to this space, right? First of all, the power of cotton, the fact that so much comes from this area in the world, the fact that we can be involved in it, the fact that when they go out in the fields and talk the language, our people who live here with us, our Black Americans, can understand that language. I just wanted to point that out.
Возьмите, пожалуйста. Меня зовут Елена Урлаева. Я уже к вам приезжала, но только вам не достался такой листочек. Написано, что медики не должны собирать хлопок.
But our intrusion is causing upset. Behind the nurse, these three men have spotted us. And when we begin our interview, look at what is going on, finding a replacement like this young man.
How old are you? He's paid?
Oh, let's stop right there. Let's stop right there. This is happening in India. This is happening in Uzbekistan. This is happening in a lot of places. You see it? I want to leave that. No, I don't receive any money. Why is he out there working? Because these are government-owned fields, and they demand that he works. It's a major part of the basic finances of the system. Do we blame the government? Maybe. They're number 6 in production. They're competing against places with 1.3 billion, 1.6 billion people. They have 2.9 billion people in the neighboring countries picking cotton, and the United States with big machines. If we do not take the time to understand where our products come from, then this is a likely resolution. That, my friends, is slavery. That's slavery in its clearest form. It's the thing that you hate. It's the reason that you associate cotton. If they refuse to work, then their parents and their aunties are fired from their public jobs. That's the answer to your question, Brother Picasso. They're fired from their jobs, and they're typically the main breadwinners for the family. So if they refuse to work, they're fired. Now, I want to caveat into this. There are a lot of evil people in the world. But you know what? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, sister. The Picasso, I'm sorry, I just read it the wrong way. There are a lot of evil people in the world. But you know, there's no more evil person than a complacent person who turns a blind eye to what things are happening. That's what happens. When you turn a blind eye to the world as it happens, and you only care about your piece, your bit of money, if I were that kind of person, then this wouldn't make a difference to me. But I'm not. I'm just not. Look, I've been talking to you since 6:30 this morning, Kazakh time. Understanding how to explain to you why this product might have an extra 35 cents, 50 cents on each piece kept me up all night long. I can't sleep unless I know that every part of what I'm doing is positive, and that I am not a function of a system that is destructive. I pride our organization on that. So this is where I switch it up. This is where we change the topic and change the conversation. I want to introduce you to somebody, someone who should become part of our story, your story, and you should know this person. This is Ida. And this is Ida sitting in my house. Ida is a professor at the Nazarbayev University. She has a doctorate, and her passion, and that's her nephew, is this. One of the reasons that Ida is so passionate about this is because she understands all of these other things that are going on. Ida goes directly to the farms in Uzbekistan and will only work with people who are paying people well and treating them well. She's in my house. She's a part of the family that we call family here in Kazakhstan. This has been all to get you to understand the value of what I'm telling you right now. Ida came to me with this product. She was sent to me partially through prayer. I gotta be honest with you, I prayed. I don't want to be part of a bad system. And when she was sent to us, she brought us a product where she said, look, I go in, I sit down, I go into the fields. The fields. You understand? Just like this. And she makes sure this don't happen. She makes sure she's only buying from people who give a hoot and give a care about the folks that work for them, because they her people. She watches the product all the way through. She catches the cotton through every single stage. She makes sure that the stitch of the shirt is good product, quality to the core, only the best fabrics. And that's why we are happy to put the word freedom wear on our shirts. Ida's not the only one. I myself, I've not only been out in these farms, working directly with the people. You should know that. That was my driver. Buddy. I've been in the fields. I sit there and manage it. I have literally sat at a table with a box full of money and handed each man his pay. And the man that worked harder than the other man, I doubled his pay sometimes to make sure that he was paid appropriately. I said all of this to explain to you that freedom wear is free of any poverty or slavery. We're not paying into no people who used to enslave us, and we're not paying no people who are enslaving somebody else. There are, you know, a little disclaimer they put on some of the movies, no animals were hurt in making this movie. No black people were enslaved in the making of the Freedom Nation. Or you receive a freedom wear. And what did you pay? $1? Nowadays, $1 won't even give you enough gas to get halfway down the street. You have a free product. It's called freedom wear, not just because we're Freedom Nation, but because that word freedom means something to us. You're going to sell it for $10, $15 anyway. So why not pay the extra 75 cents? Why not pay the extra $1? If I send you this price list, this whole conversation for me started because I was doing this. I was creating the price list to import into our billing system. And when creating the price list to import into the billing system, I got to the first product and I wrote it down. And I started writing the regular stuff. Pre-shrunk, anti-wrinkle, blah, 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 blah. And I realized that the most important thing for me to have written on this sheet of paper, the most important thing to put in the beginning of the description of all our products, free of all systems of slavery throughout its production. I think that that's the most important thing. The other things are great, but the freedom wear is free of all systems of slavery throughout its production, its entire production. And I ain't just saying it. I've been there. I watch it. I go out there. These farmers, that old man been a farmer since the Soviets were there. 40 years he been out there. I know all of the farmers picking the cotton for this product by name. I can tell you their home situations. I can tell you what's happening with their kids. I can tell you if they have grandchildren. You can't do that for the stuff you got. And if you buy made in the USA from US cotton, you don't want to tell that story. And that white guy don't want to tell you that story. He don't want to tell you that story at all. Because at some point it'll cross, well, yeah, we used to be in the plantation business, and you know, that's just what they did back then. They called you niggers. That's what they did. And you want to give money to him. Amen. I am at the end. This has been an hour and 20 minutes, and I hope that it's been educational. I wish that I could have the thousands of people watch videos about the significance of how we spend our money and make our money. I'm not sure how many people will watch this to understand what we've created, but we have created a free product. It is free from all forms of imprisoning, taking advantage of, or hurting people. You don't know the stories of me on that farm. Man had his house burned down. We saw one more crooked person try to loan this person money, try to take advantage of him. Said that if we loaned him the money, which was about 4 years' salary, I think. If we loan him the money to buy us a new house, then he could pay back out of his check, which meant he would be darn near working for free for 4 years. I said, I am not going to put that man into slavery because he had a calamity. I'll tell you where the profits from these shirts and the profits from our work went. I paid for that man's house. Excuse me, I'm getting a little emotional on that because the day it happened, I was so angry to even believe that people would try to propagate anything that used to happen to us, to somebody who we were benefiting from. We have developed a free product. That's why I keep inviting y'all to Kazakhstan. That's why I keep inviting you to come to this part of the world. We have to take charge of it from its core. At our core, those of us who understand what we've been through are decent people. We don't work like the Western European did. We have a responsibility to come out here and help our people who have just been shifted the responsibility of slavery back onto them. We have to abolish the system. Every penny we make needs to be good money. I'm going to send out that price list. If you're watching and you're waiting for it, send a price list. Send out sample packs. Send in sample packs right now of all these shirts for $250, 25 shirts. They have all kinds of sweaters and all kinds of sweaters inside of it. I'm sending out you 14 different colors of the shirt. Okay? So you can see the dyes and the handiwork of those people who do their work with an honest day's worth of living for honest people without any propagation of any kind of system of slavery. That is your brother Farouk Hunter. I leave you on this note. One of these days we'll talk about this. That's our flower gin. Yeah, we'll talk about freedom flower later because weed is a hell of a thing. But for right now, we'll leave it to the t-shirts. And I pray to God, I pray in the most strongest and sincere way that you take advantage of this brand, that you understand the word freedom means that we have abolished the concepts that still exist to this day of putting any forms of slavery and hardship into the production of these products. And you can become the agent for that blessing in the world. This is your brother Farouk Hunter. As always, may God bless you. I leave you with peace. I leave you with the best message. And I pray that at some point we can completely abolish the effects of colonialism and slavery from our lives. And like our sister said, be agents of freedom all the way to the core. Peace, blessings, assalamu alaikum, uhuru, and good night.